Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and today we're going to be taking a look at a slightly more upmarket case than we're used to here on the channel. This is the Corsair ICUE 465X RGB. Keep watching to find out lots more. Okay, so this is Corsair's ICUE 465X RGB. This is a relatively mid-range case as far as Corsair is concerned. This, at the moment in the UK, retails for around about the £109 mark. I was really fortunate. I managed to pick this up on a Facebook deal and paid around about, I'm not going to tell you how much I paid for it because that is going to spoil it, but essentially I've had a pretty good deal, so I'm pretty happy with it regardless of how this review goes. But I'm going to review this based as if I'd paid full retail for it, which is what I expect most of you will be watching this video to find out if it's actually worth £110 or whatever that is in your country. So what is it? Essentially it is a good quality case, nice thick steel, great build quality, comes included with 3 of the LL120 fans pre-installed. That is one of the odd decisions I find about this case. The fact that you've got 3 fans in the front, which is fantastic, great for airflow, but there's nothing for exhaust, not a thing. Nidda, nothing, not a sausage, which for me is a really weird setup. Most PCs work better with a form of exhaust. You can get air into a case relatively easily, and in fact most negative pressure cases actually work particularly well because it actually tries to draw the heat out of the case, whereas this is just pushing cold air in and air will escape wherever it can. But anyway, I'm digressing. Essentially this would be much better in my opinion, especially given the price, if it had one more of those LL120 fans pre-installed at the back of the case. Also will help with the looks because obviously this is an RGB case and it has got a lot of tempered glass. It's designed for showing off components, which is absolutely fine if all of your components are at the front of the case, but anything towards the back of the case is going to be pretty dark and pretty muted unless you add some of those additional Corsair parts, which of course is going to increase the price. And these fans are not cheap. You can pick up a set of 3 of these fans, which would make it up to 6, which is the maximum this case can take, and that is going to cost you, well, an additional £50 plus. So that takes it to the next level of pricing in my opinion, and it is way too much. Anyway, that's my slight rant out of the way. Let's get on and take a look at this thing. So as you can see on the front, we've got a complete solid sheet of tempered glass, and it's actually been spaced out really well. So it's actually sticking off of the front by about an inch and a half. So there's no restriction for airflow whatsoever there. Yes, you do have the 90-degree bend for the air to pass through, but it isn't as restrictive as a lot of cases these days where you've got filters and shut-offs and all that kind of stuff. Also behind there is a removable mesh filter, and it's one of those really nice nylon mesh filters which are relatively easy to breathe through. This front panel is completely removable with the 4 thumb screws on the front, and once those are undone you can remove this whole section, which we'll do now. One thing to bear in mind when you are undoing these is the case itself is actually held on with these, so if you do undo them, this can drop out quite easily, so do be careful. So with that out of the way, the dangerous bit out of the way, let's take a look at the filtration. So the filtration is this large full-size filter, which is magnetic and also has claps at the bottom, so that fixes in quite nicely. And actually just before I did this review, I quickly washed this under the tap with a little bit of soapy water, and it's come up pretty much like new. And to reinstall it, just magnets hold it all into place, so excellent, no problems there. Personally, I would have liked to have seen the design have been slightly less plastic, if that's even a thing. These X's in the front obviously are going to completely cover up the fans and the illumination. These are RGB fans, addressable RGB fans, and they are the LL series, so they've got illumination in the center and they've got illumination around the outside edge. So this cross basically is going to obliterate that perfect view. So it would have been nice if you could just cut those plastic bits out and just have a full mesh, but again, that's being quite picky. But having said that, this is a £110 case, so you do expect them to go the extra mile for that in my opinion. Anyway, so with this out of the way, you get the full view of the fans, and you've got this nice kind of opaque white on there, so the light's going to shine through nice and clear and crisp. You can't really do a great deal with these, obviously because they're included and they're quite expensive fans. You don't really want to be messing around with them if at all possible, but should you want to, you can always remove one, stick it to the back of the case, then you've got a little bit of negative pressure on the back there pulling the air through. You can, if you want to, replace these entirely and put 140mm fans in, but you can only put 2 in the front. You can't put a 3 in there. Obviously, space isn't permitting that. So let's move around to the side. So the side panel, as you can see, tempered glass. Again, as you'd expect to see on a case like this. And once again, we've got more of these thumb screws. This one is actually a little bit more secure. So if you do undo all of the thumb screws, the side panel doesn't want to literally fall off and try to kill you. And there you go. So you can just lift these off the rubber mounts, and then we can take a look inside the cabin. So plenty of room in there, really nice layout, standard ATX form factor layout. So you've got room in here for ITX, micro ATX and ATX. You probably could fit extended ATX in there if you wanted to. You may find it encroaching slightly on some of these rubber grommets. Again, depending on your board, you may need to make some measurements first to see how that goes. Or alternatively, you could route some of the cabling elsewhere, etc. There's lots of cutouts and punch outs and lots of different ways of routing cables should you need to. Nice inclusions are in this bottom corner. We've got a nice big cutout for your HD audio connector. Also, you've got a rubber grommet here on the bottom for passing through things like your USB Type 3. Also, excellent place for putting the graphics card power through, so PCI Express graphics, straight through there, giving you a nice vertical line for the wires, which always look much nicer than kind of weird vertical or snakes going around all over the place. This does actually support vertical GPU mounting. There are 2 plates on the back which are removable, which we'll take a look at in a little bit, allowing you to put a graphics card in this position. Personally, I think if you are using a graphics card which is a dual slot, it's going to get hot. So ideally you want to be using water cooling on your graphics card if you plan on vertical mounting. Also, you will need to supply your own GPU mounting equipment. There is nothing here that actually holds it in place. There is a tiny screw hole in here, so you could put something in there. I don't know of anything which actually comes as part of the kit. I didn't see it, certainly. And if you bought this new, I'm pretty sure that isn't something that comes with it. But essentially, there's room in there for a standoff, some kind of support bracket, which may be an additional thing from Corsair. But yeah, essentially, I would say if you are going to be doing vertical GPU, it's going to have to be water cooled. Otherwise, it's going to be way too close to this glass panel and it's going to get choked off. Even though you've got plenty of airflow coming in through this front section, it just really is too close. And if it's larger than the 2 slot device, no chance whatsoever. But single slot or water cooled, absolutely fine. Moving towards the front, where the fans are, you've got plenty of room there, so you can put a 360mm radiator in if you wanted to. Really, if you're doing a 360mm radiator, again, obviously, ideally, you'd want some kind of custom fitting system. If you buy a 360mm rad, generally it's going to come with its own fans, which then negates the need for these fans on the front, which then is kind of pointless buying this case, because this case essentially has been built around those fans. They are the bulk of the cost in this case, and they are part of its kind of signature look. So obviously 360mm radiator, you can do it, but you'd need to really go for a custom just to take advantage of the fans to keep them there. You wouldn't be able to do a push-pull configuration in the front. There just simply isn't enough room in this bottom basement section. Moving slightly further in, we've got mounting areas here for SSDs. Now, technically you could put an SSD on the front or the back of this section. With long enough screws, you could do it. There is a section here which is punched out slightly, which looks like it could be used for running cables through, but I have tried it and unfortunately you cannot get SATA power or SATA data through this section, which, to be honest with you, in my opinion, is actually something of a missed opportunity. With like the Be Quiet cases, the 500 I think it was, that section there was cut out and there was a plastic insert, so you could run your cables behind, put your plastic insert back in, and that would cover up the cabling. Again, this may not be designed entirely for putting those type of drives there, but potentially you could, so it would have been nice to take full advantage of it. Next to this, we've got some rubber grommets, which actually I've had a little bit of a play with. In this case, is a couple of months old already, and there doesn't seem to be any signs of wear, and they don't really want to seem to come out very easily, so that's all really good. Again, lots of punch outs along the top for fans, in the center here for RGB connections or for, again, CPU headers, that sort of thing, and in the top corner for your CPU additional power, that kind of stuff. All well and good, but inside, generally, excellent layout. I would have probably liked to have seen a few more punch outs along this top section, and maybe not necessarily a ventilated area here. Most people, I think, are going to have their power supply mounted with the fan at the bottom rather than up. So actually, for a slightly cleaner look, it might have been nicer to have that as just one completely flat area, but again, that's being a little bit picky. On the top section, we've got an area which again is a little bit on the odd side. There is a removable magnetic filter on the top, as we're used to seeing on pretty much every case these days, But if I flip this down a little bit, you can see where the oddness begins. So we've got mounting areas here for a 140mm fan, but here a 120mm fan. So it's a 120, 140, or a 240 all-in-one radiator, or two 120s. Again, a slightly weird setup. If this was a little bit wider, then it would have been perfect for the GPU being mounted vertically, and also this could have been pushed out further to get two 140s in this top section, which would definitely increase airflow, and also give you the option of a 280 radiator also, which would be fantastic. But yeah, weirdly, I don't think I've seen this in a case before, ever, where you have a 140 at the front and a 120 at the back. Most people would either say, right, okay, fair enough, you can't get a 140 there, so we'll just say it's 120s front and back just to keep things symmetrical and all nice. But no, they've done this weird solution of a 140 and a 120. Please do let me know in the comments section below if you've bought one of these cases, or you've used one of these cases, or you've worked on one of these cases or built for someone, and you've actually gone ahead and used a 140 and a 120 in one of these. I'm really interested to know, because I don't think anybody ever in the world at any time would do that. But prove me wrong. So moving round to the rear end, so to speak. On the back, we've got area for a 120mm fan. Again, it's unpopulated, which is a massive, massive discrepancy in my opinion. Another LL120 fan in there would be the icing on the cake. And being that this is a relatively expensive cake, why not? Moving down, we've got our removable PCI Express brackets. Also, this section here, I've seen other reviewers doing reviews of this particular case, and they were a little bit kind of about the back panel here. These are normally fixed in place, but they do actually supply two removable plates. So yeah, I don't see the problem there at all. To me, that's all absolutely fine. It's a little bit of a crap design, the fact that it's not really wide enough to actually accommodate that sort of thing without water cooling. And I think if you are going for some serious water cooling on your GPU and your whole system with a pump res combo, that sort of thing, I think really you'd probably be pushing the boat out a little bit more on your case price. So it seems a little bit odd at this price point. Again, £100, £110 is the kind of mid-range these days, and water cooling of that kind of exotic type is, I would say, the next tier up, in my opinion. Moving down at the bottom, we've got a normal cutout here for the power supply, and I'm actually really pleased to see that there isn't one of those weird brackets that you attach to the power supply and then slide it in. For me, I don't see any point in those at all. They don't really help anything at all. I'm quite happy to put a power supply in and put 4 screws in. Simples. Another weird inclusion on the bottom is the removable plastic filter for your power supply. Again, they've got a filtration section on the bottom, so why they need the filtration on the top, I guess it does give you the flexibility of mounting your PSU up or down, whichever. But again, if you are considering water cooling, the last thing you want is your power supply fan up. Any leaks in there, it goes straight into the power supply, and blue smoke, bad things happen. So we don't like that. So yeah, there's some odd decisions in this case, there really is. And none more so than the filter. So the filter, where is, if you try to actually pull it out, there is actually like a little flap on the bottom, but it's virtually impossible to get out. The feet aren't actually high enough for you to lift it down, or push it down rather, and pull it at the same time. You can't get 2 fingers in there. It's just, it ain't gonna happen. I got relatively fat fingers, but even if you've got really slender man fingers, you're not going to get 2 fingers in there. Ain't going to happen. So you've still got either rock the case to the side like that to lift it down and get enough room for it to slide out. Again, it's just a bizarre idea. Why not just have it either magnetic or something like that, which would be a lot simpler. Having a push down flap on a filter that is a couple of mil away from the ground isn't a great idea, in my opinion. So yeah, you either got to lift it up and pull it out, or rock it to the side, which, if you're going to rock it to the side and all that sort of stuff, you might just have a crap filter on there. Anyway, moving on to the back side. So the back is held on with screws. Unfortunately, they do not appear to be captive screws. Maybe they were at one point, but well, they ain't now. Taking off the back panel, quite a rigid back panel, and then we get to see the cabling mess, which personally I have created, so that is pretty much on me. So we've got the cutout here for the power supply, for the CPU, the 8-pin, 8+4, all that kind of stuff that can go through there. You probably won't get an 8-pin through in one shot. You'll probably have to split the cables to get it through there, but we'll find out in the build what happens there. But I think it's a little bit too tight there to maybe get an 8-pin through in one shot. This section here, really nice, so if you have got any kind of radiator or extra fans with RGB, etc. on there, nice area there for passing your cables through. There's another one towards the front for where the I/O comes through. And there's absolutely tons and tons of punch outs here. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I'm probably missing 1 or 2, but yeah, there's around about 17 or 18 punch outs on there for cable ties. So you should be able to do an absolutely amazingly tidy build in this. Obviously, that is down to your own skill and dexterity. So mine is probably going to look absolutely horrible, but potentially you could make a really nice job of this. Now, from looking at the way they've actually made all these channels, etc., what I'm thinking is that the main bulk of the cables for your I/O, etc., which I've separated slightly already, that ideally is going to go along here, and then down this section, and then along on this back panel. That way then, by doing that, you then leave the drive bays free and clear. Also, all of this fan stuff for the front, you can take through to the front section. I've actually moved this RGB controller. This is the Node Core, I believe it's called. Again, supports up to 6 fans, so 3 are already connected. It does have the downside of only being able to connect via USB. This can only ever be controlled by the ICUE software. There are no connectors for your 3-pin or your 4-pin RGB controllers, anything like that. Purely it is down through the software and that USB header. So do make sure if you are buying this that you do actually have a spare USB 2 header on your motherboard to be able to connect it to. And also, if you do want to add more RGB to this, more bling, make sure it's compatible with ICUE, otherwise yeah, you're in a whole world of trouble. At the moment, as far as I know, the only real software which works with it is the ASUS Aurora Sync, which I believe that's a relatively new thing. So if you've got an ASUS motherboard and you're putting it in here, you're going to be absolutely fine. But if you're running MSI, Gigabyte, etc., unless you're going for the kind of default Unicorn Puke, you may have difficulty matching the two or synchronizing them. If you're going for static colors, then you should be pretty much a-okay. If you're going for any kind of random patterns or any kind of color fades, you will probably find that eventually, because they normally are a little bit different, it's going to get out of sync pretty quickly, even though you can probably select kind of fading blue at the beginning. By the time it's done it a couple of cycles, it'll be completely out of sync and look an absolute mess. But if you're going for that kind of Unicorn Puke look, then absolutely fine. If you're going for statics, again, pretty much fine. Breathe in single colors, yes, no problem. Yeah, you get the idea. It's not the perfect solution. It would be so much better if there was some kind of plug-in control, so you could disable the ICUE and just plug it straight into a motherboard header. That would be the sensible solution. But unfortunately, Corsair, as we know, doesn't always do sensible. So anyway, cabling wise, yeah, that's going to be all tucked in around there. Then we'll have our main power cable coming through this middle section. Again, there's tie down points which are wider there. So yes, that all makes perfect sense. The front panel, these fans unfortunately are only controlled RGB wise from this core node, or node core, whatever you want to call it. So you will need headers on your motherboard which are suitable for it. So there's 3 fans on the front, obviously, so 3 headers on your board in this front section. The cables are relatively long, so this is one of the 4-pin PWM style connectors. So even if you had to, you could probably route one through the back here and then down onto a motherboard. This does come about halfway, so most motherboards have got a chassis fan header at the back. So potentially you could get one to the rear, and most boards will have 2 fan headers for the front. If not, you can always get a relatively cheap splitter. I'll keep on banging on about them in the videos, and if you want to, actually, I'll put a link in the video description. So if you want to see what these splitters are actually like, there'll be a link there. Also, I'll put a link up here, which you can click on, which goes into RGBs and fans and all that kind of stuff. A little bit of more depth on how RGB works and fan control and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, on the front panel for the I/O, let's talk about that for a second. So we've got a USB 3.0 header. We've also got the usual suspects here. So you've got a reset switch, power switch, and power LED. No hard drive activity LED, oddly, which is a little bit weird. I didn't think in 2020 we'd be seeing cases that didn't have hard drive or SSD activity LEDs, but there you go. Again, it's Corsair, they don't do things normally. We've also got the HD audio connector, which is actually quite a nice long cable. So this actually, I've already kind of planned it out in my head how this is going to work, and it's very likely, if I don't take it for just bunch down here, quite easily it can go all the way around there and then tuck up inside towards that panel header, and that can all be tucked out. So that all works really nicely. So USB 3.0, again, usual chunky type connector. That is quite a long one as well, so depending on where your actual connectivity is, if it's on the side, you've got no problems. If it's down here somewhere, you can take it up through that pass-through, nice and easy. Yeah, so that just leaves us with the fan connectors. So there's 3 of those. Again, pretty straightforward. You do have an additional USB Type 2, and also you have a SATA power connector. Now this is for the lighting node core, or Pro Core node, or whatever it's called. I don't really care what it's called. The Corsair lighting thingy. Basically, you've got a SATA connector for power and USB to communicate with the software. So quite a lot of cable in there, but I think it's going to be relatively straightforward to manage. I don't really see any major issues there. Let's take a quick look on the bottom of the case at the filters. Actually, before we do that, there is the drive cage there, as I discussed earlier. So you've got removable sleds, usual kind of deal. So if you want to use 3.5-inch drives, they just push in the side, no tools required. If you want to use a 2.5-inch drive, then you can use the included screws to screw those into those cages. Also, there's actually 2 removable cages here for 2.5-inch drives, either SSDs or mechanical. You can use either for there, so yeah, no problems there. In this caddy, you get your mounting hardware. There's a box and instructions, all that kind of usual stuff. Moving down to the bottom, got these really nice chunky feet, and you've got really nice big rubber pads there to absorb vibrations and all that kind of stuff. If you do want to remove the drive cage, because you're not going to be using 3.5-inch drives and it's just going to be in your way, or you're using a massive power supply, then you can do. There's just 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, and also a thumb screw on the back of the cage. So take those out and you can remove that cage in its entirety. So giving you tons and tons of room on that bottom, okay, whether you want to or not. I actually think probably leaving it in there is going to be the easiest thing. It's something less to store in the box after you've done your build. So there we go. That is the Corsair ICUE 465 Pro RGB. What a weird name. What do you think of it? I do quite like it in a lot of ways. For me, it ticks a lot of boxes. Price-wise, possibly not so much. The whole Corsair lighting thing, I'm not too sure if it's something that I can wholeheartedly get behind. It does work out to be quite an expensive hobby, although in some games and some titles, it does look fantastic. There is an add-on or various patches for things like Far Cry 5, where if something's actually on fire in the game, you get the kind of fire colors within your peripherals and also the fans, so you can actually synchronize it and make your PC experience that much more immersive. But if you're on a little bit more of a tighter budget and maybe that's not quite your thing, or you want simplicity of just being able to press a button to change colors, this isn't going to happen on this particular case. But that isn't who this is aimed for. This is aimed for the enthusiasts who like to tinker, get their hands dirty and spend a bit of money on their components. Obviously you can synchronize this with other Corsair products, keyboards, mice, etc, etc. So you can build a complete ecosystem out of this, but it's going to cost you. So again, let us know what you think of this in the comments section below. But in the meantime, I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.